thing that people could do as a doctoral dissertation.
Oh, thank you.
You might end up broadening it. You might end up doing more of a literature review. You might broaden the scope of the data that you gather. But, typically an EDD or a PhD dissertation is going to be, larger in scope than a master's thesis. But there's no reason why you couldn't you couldn't treat your master's work as sort of preliminary. That raises another thing I want to mention, and that's, you do a master's thesis, you say I'm going to convert this into a dissertation. A dissertation is a book. So think of it as a book. It's a book that's heavily critiqued and reviewed. It's a book that's supposed to be of substance. So what does of substance mean? Well, it means that basically you should be an authority in the field. I didn't talk about this. One of the reasons why I wanted Heather to come and talk, because Heather's one of the students in the course this semester that now knows what she wants to do. She probably knows more about her topic than anybody on her committee. She might disagree with me, but I think that's true. And what you want to do as a doctoral student making your proposal presentation, you want to go into this meeting you have with your committee in charge. And by being in charge means you've thought through all of the other studies that somebody might suggest you should do instead of the one you propose to do. And you have an answer as to why you don't want to do those studies. And that's really important to be that well versed in your topic that you can do that. And so that means you've read a lot, and you've thought a lot, and you've scoped out a terrain that you're going to explore. So that's an important thing to do. Now back to the master's issue. There are many times, the academic convention says, it's always good to quote yourself so that you write papers for publication. And if you've been at it a little while, it's not long before you start quoting papers you published. And you quote, self-quoting is the convention in academia. It's not a good idea in doing master's thesis, in basing a dissertation on a master's thesis, to make too much of that prior work. Mm-hmm. I would not encourage you to.
You don't want to refer to it as the seminal work.
Right.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
It runs along the lines of self-plagiarism. Yeah. That's frowned upon.
Yeah, you sort of want to be a confident subservient when it comes to the committee, I think. You don't want to be arrogant about what you've been up to. Okay, so let's talk about the literature review for a bit. And before I go on, I want to know, is this meeting your expectations?
Can we go back to the topic for a minute?
Is this okay what we're doing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I just have one thing to tell you about a topic, and I've been there. Make sure what you're studying is what you're passionate about, and that you're interested in it, and you can maintain that interest for 1 to 2 years. Don't take a gift topic from your advisor. I did that. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was asked to choose a topic very early in my program, and so I was kind of given a topic, and it didn't make a lot of sense to me, and I really did not like researching it, and that's why my new advisor said, please choose a new topic. And so I did some research and found something that I understand and I love and I'm passionate about, and I actually look forward to reading stuff and doing research about it. So it's really important, because Dr. Bryant saw me struggle about a year ago, and I was just deadpanned. I hated it. Now I think I pulled it together much better. So it happens.
Good point. So are any of you struggling with finding a topic? See if you beat the writing.
I have also
It's not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy.
And one of the things to realize about this struggle is that every time you abandon an idea, that's a step forward, because it's a path you discarded. So your path may be, crooked and not linear, but every time you discard an idea, then you moved yourself forward a bit. So, Well, I thought I would talk next about the literature review, which is a topic that people often struggle with. And there are all kinds of issues with the literature review. The conventional view of this goes like this. You read and read and read, and you keep track of all the different empirical studies that you encounter. Empirical studies tend to end with recommendations for future research, or recommendations for something or other, policy development or what have you. And so you take those recommendations and you eventually find, oh, here's a bunch of things that have not been studied that the field says should be studied. In one of his earlier books, Creswell referred to this as sort of the deficit approach to the literature, or to finding a topic, to settling on a topic. So you're looking for an area which has not been studied, but which the scholars in the field say needs to be studied. So that's a nice sort of logical progression if it works. To make it work, you have to read the literature. And to go back to dissertation abstracts, most dissertations do that. Most of them end with this conventional set of statements about further research. So this gives you a handle on what people are saying needs to be done in the way of future research. So armed with that, then you can go ahead and say, well, this appeals to me. I'm going to try to study this area because people say it needs to be studied. That's one way to think about using the literature. Another way is to be much more haphazard about it, which is what most of us do, and to read until something strikes our fancy, and or we enter the literature with already an idea in place about what we want, and that shapes our exploration of the research literature. We can argue about what constitutes research literature, and sometimes you'll have committees that will say, well, articles or things in newspapers and popular magazines, and that this doesn't constitute literature. That's debatable, but it certainly is. It's an attitude you might encounter. Sometimes we think about literature as data gathering efforts that are reported in terms of findings. So people set out either quantitative or qualitative. They gather data, they analyze it, they report it. We call this empirical research. In some of the newer qualitative thinking, that restriction is no longer there, and the literature is broadened considerably to include just about anything, which opens up all sorts of web resources, which can be really pretty exciting. But you should be aware that there are conventions that define what the literature is. So let's talk about the proposal. So the convention says the proposal is a 3-chapter document that has an introductory part, it has a literature review, and then it has a methodology part. That's the classic convention. And in the first chapter, you have a bunch of sections. So one of the first things that committee members look for is a purpose statement. You can find this all on the web. You don't need to take notes, you're welcome to. But you just look on any place on the web where people are talking about writing theses, and this structure will be laid out for you.